Greater Vancouver real estate market is seeing emerging signs of recovery. Last time I checked, sales were down 10% year over year. So let's jump into the stats and see why they're saying June may be a month of recovery, potentially a shift in the market, a reversal. In this video, I'll show you key stats, show you how the market has shifted in both month over month and year over year, and unpack the bigger forces behind it all. By the end of this video, you're going to have a good idea of what is happening in the real estate market here in Greater Vancouver for the month of June. All right, let's look at sales. Sales in June 2025 were 2,181 across all property types. This is down 9.8%, almost 10% year over year from 2,418 in June 2024. So when we look at sales dropping 10% year over year, this is a dramatic slowdown. May's decline was nearly double. Month over month, we're essentially flat, so up 0.1% month over month. So there were 20, that's so funny. There was one more sale in June than there was in May. And maybe that's why they're saying market is seeing emerging signs of recovery. You got to keep an eye on what data they're using. Yes, up 0.1% month over month, but there's only one more sale. So 2,180 sales in May and 2,181 sales in June. But the key thing to notice for sales is actually in May, the decline was nearly double. So month over month, we're essentially flat, which could suggest the bottoming of the market. So maybe it's not exactly the sales volume or the change in sales month over month, but maybe the lack of a massive decline, which we saw April to May. And even if we are essentially flat, this is a sign that buyers are stepping back in. There are a few external factors. Mortgage rates have not changed for the past. There may be some growing comfort with the current rate environment. Rates have dropped significantly from last year. They haven't changed much for the past 2 months. This could be helping stabilize the market despite broader economic uncertainties with our government and the boys down south, the USA. But now let's look at listings. There were 6,315 new active listings in June 2025. This is up 10% year over year. So if you're looking year over year, sales are down 10%, inventory is up 10%. That is a huge gap. When we're looking month over month, there was actually a 4.1% increase from May. So there were only 6,065 active listings in May 2025. We're up to 6,315. And then when we look at total active listings, there were 17,561 in June 2025. This is up 2% from May and then up 23.8% year over year. So nearly 24% more total listings in all of Greater Vancouver for the year 2025 versus the year 2024. So we are seeing inventory continuing to build and there's no signs of it slowing down. We're seeing sellers re-entering the market, possibly encouraged by the lower interest rates. We're seeing more serious buyers on the market. And again, with interest rates roughly 2% down from last summer, some homeowners have been holding off, are finally ready to jump in the market and try to do something. Now, let's look at the sales to active ratios. This is how we determine whether or not we're in a buyer's market or a balanced market. Right now, the sales to active listings ratio is 12.8%. So if there were 100 homes in a market, roughly 13 of them are selling this month. This puts us in a balanced market, but slightly buyer leaning. Because between 10 and 20% we're in a balanced market. This means that most segments are in a balanced market territory. Detached is the only segment tipping slightly into buyer's market range. A balanced market generally leads to more stable pricing and stable price changes, minimal price changes. So the residential benchmarks is the average of all the homes. So condos, townhomes, half duplexes, detached homes. The benchmark price is $1,173,100. This is down 2.8% year over year, so almost 3% decrease year over year, and we're down 0.3% month over month. So now we're going to look at detached, attached, and condos. So for detached, the benchmark price is just under $2 million, so $1,994,500. This is down 3.2% year over year and down 0.1% month over month. For the attached market, we're looking at about $1,100,000. This is down 3% year over year and down 0.3% month over month. And then condos, the benchmark price we're looking at $748,000. This is down 3.2% and down 1.1% month over month. A big change month over month. So we're seeing prices slide generally across all product types. This is exacerbated by time, so the year over year numbers are much larger. But with condos, we're seeing a huge month-over-month drop, 1.2% in just 1 month. We are really seeing this buildup in inventory start to put pricing pressure on sellers because they're competing against other sellers in their building, complex, or neighborhood. There's also uncertainty from the trade and job markets keeping prices in check. All indicators are pointing towards pricing remaining stable or continuing to decrease slowly. Right now, as far as any type of reversal, it is hard to say. We did see a slowdown in the decrease of sales, kind of a double negative, but sales are decreasing at a slower rate, and it looks like they may have even bottomed out. But we will see there's still a massive amount of inventory on the market. And even if we start to see sales going up, they may need to do this to actually make a difference or come up in a long enough time frame where inventory is not rising as aggressively as it is right now. So we are still in the very early stages. It is hard to say anything, but this is a good time to keep an eye on the market if you're trying to make a move because things may be starting to change and you still have some time. All right, now let's look at what buyers and sellers need to know. So right now there is more selection, there's less competition, there are lower rates than last year. So generally it does seem like it's a much better environment for buyers. This has been the case pretty much for the entire year. Right now we are seeing a lot of options on the market. Buyers are taking a lot of time to shop. So I'm running around all over the lower mainland looking at a ton of different properties. And what I'm seeing personally is a lot of room in price on some of these properties. So if we're looking in a townhome complex and one sold for $900K last year, we're seeing that same unit hovering around $800K, which for my math guys out there, you can see that is way more than a 0.3% change month over month and a bigger change than a 3% year over year. But there are some really crazy opportunities in the market where you're seeing an over 10% gap in price year over year. And what I am noticing is early on in the year, we were able to have time to negotiate these deals. There weren't too many buyers that we were competing against. But what I'm finding now is whenever a really good price property in a good neighborhood comes on the market, there are a few buyers that are actually competing. And I'm finding that we are in competition on these types of properties. So it's hard to say what this means, but it could be a sign that buyers are becoming wise to these opportunities and there is more competition starting to enter the market for these types of properties. This is kind of shown in the sales data, what I'm feeling in the market. And again, sometimes the data is a month or two behind what is actually happening in the market today. I would expect to see that sales start to come up a little bit more, but it does feel like inventory is still flooding the market. So we'll see what happens. In the market, if you're actively buying in this market, you can find some really great opportunities, over 10% difference in price. You just got to be fully approved and ready to get in there and start submitting some offers. Now for sellers, the days of quick sales are long gone. You really need to make the home stand out, price, prep, and promote effectively. If I were to give a more specific piece of advice, it would be on price. And I know as a seller, you don't want to reduce price, but you need to look at the comparables in your neighborhood and not price where they're selling, but price where they will sell in a month or two's time. So price ahead of the market. If the market is doing this, don't price here and wait for the market to come down. You got to price down here and let the market come to you. And the other thing is keep a close eye on what is happening in your neighborhood or get your realtor to help you do this. Talk to the listing agents that are selling homes in your neighborhood. Sometimes you can get ahead of price drops or leverage their increase in activity with your own open houses and capture some of those buyers. You can also gauge how their activity is and what is happening on their side if they're getting offers, and then even get an insight on price before it even gets reported to the MLS. So if something sells for a really good price, you can drop your price before anybody else in the neighborhood knows about this sale, and you can capture that next wave of buyers before everyone else in your neighborhood does. So there's some new advice for sellers. So in summary, the June market is looking much more stable than pretty much any market update we've looked at this entire year. We didn't see a huge decrease in sales month over month, which we have been seeing pretty much this entire year. So it is still a tactical game out there, but this could be early signs of a reversal. So maybe there is some truth to that headline we saw at the beginning of the video. So whether or not you're buying or selling, knowing how to read the trends can make all the difference. And if you need help building a strategy that works in today's market, let me know. I'll see you on the next market update video. I've got attached detached, and condos coming up, and we're going to do a deep dive in all of those. And I'll see you on the next ones. Peace.